I never thought my own family would be the ones to make me feel small. But that night, as we all sat around the dinner table, their words cut deeper than any battlefield ever could. It was supposed to be a casual family dinner, something we hadn't done in a while. Mom made her usual roast, Dad poured wine like everything was fine, and my younger siblings were joking around like always. But when the conversation turned to me and my career, the smiles quickly faded. My brother laughed and said, "Natalie's just playing soldier out there." My uncle chimed in. "She could have been a lawyer or a doctor, but no, she joined the army. What a waste." Even my mom, who usually stays quiet, said, "We just thought you'd do something more." They didn't see the uniform I wore every day. They didn't know the weight of responsibility I carried or the lives I helped protect. To them, I was still just the girl who left home too early, chasing something they couldn't understand. I didn't argue. I just sat there, swallowing the lump in my throat, pretending the food didn't taste like ashes. And then the doorbell rang. It was strange. We weren't expecting anyone. My dad opened the door, and I could hear a low, serious voice on the other side. A few seconds later, in walked a tall man in a suit, stern, polished, someone with real authority. My dad's expression changed instantly. His back straightened, his voice grew formal. I recognized the man immediately. He was Mr. Harland, my father's boss, CEO of the defense company he'd worked at for over 20 years. But what happened next silenced the whole room. Mr. Harland didn't greet my father first. He walked right past him, turned to me, and said loud and clear, "Good evening, Colonel. It's an honor to finally meet you in person." The room went still. My dad blinked. My brother dropped his fork. My mom's eyes widened. I just nodded and stood up. "Pleasure's mine, sir." The silence stretched, heavy and awkward. Nobody knew what to say. I could feel every set of eyes on me, confused, shocked, maybe even a little ashamed. The same people who had just called my career a joke were now watching a man who signs my dad's paycheck address me with the kind of respect they never gave me. They didn't know. They had no idea. And I wasn't about to explain it all, not yet. Because that dinner? That was just the beginning. What happened after Mr. Harland's visit turned the entire night upside down, and gave my family a glimpse of who I really was. Not the failure they thought they knew, but the woman they never saw coming. And when the truth finally hit them, let's just say, dinner was never the same again. Mr. Harland stood there for a moment, his eyes shifting between me and my stunned family. You could almost hear the gears turning in everyone's heads, trying to figure out what they just heard. "Colonel? Did he really say Colonel?" My father, who had spent years climbing the corporate ladder at the same defense company, couldn't even speak. His mouth opened like he was about to say something, then closed again. "Natalie's been leading the operations on our newest defense systems," Mr. Harland continued casually, like he was explaining the weather. "Her team's work has been instrumental in securing the contract we just finalized. Quite a feat, Colonel." He nodded in my direction again. I gave him a respectful smile, all while keeping my eyes on my family. My little sister, Chloe, was the first to break the silence. "Wait. You're working with Dad's company?" I nodded. "Have been for a while now. Classified until recently." Dad finally found his voice, though it sounded more like a whisper. You're the liaison from the military side?" Mr. Harland chuckled, oblivious to the family drama brewing in real time. "Liaison? No, James. Your daughter is the commanding officer in charge of the review board. She's been overseeing every stage of the $1.2 billion project your division's working on." Chloe gasped. My brother's eyes widened. My mom slowly put down her wine glass like it suddenly weighed 10 pounds. But this wasn't about showing off. I didn't come to dinner planning for any of this. Honestly, I was trying to be normal for once, to blend in, to just be a daughter, a sister. I wasn't trying to drop a bombshell on their evening. But now that the truth was out, I wasn't going to backpedal either. "I thought we agreed to keep things low-key," I said quietly to Mr. Harland, hoping to steer the moment back under control. "Apologies, Colonel. I just figured your family would be proud," he said with a sincere smile, clearly unaware of the irony in his words. Proud. That word hit different in that moment. Because for years I fought to earn that, from people in uniform, from commanding officers, from the men and women I led into missions. But here, in my childhood home, surrounded by people who claimed to love me, it felt like I had never quite measured up. I spent nearly a decade rising through the military ranks, enduring deployments, long nights, missed birthdays. I led missions most people couldn't even imagine. I earned the title of colonel the hard way, through grit, through failure, through every moment I thought I couldn't keep going but did anyway. But none of that ever made it into family conversations. To them, I just disappeared into the army and never quite made it back. Until tonight. And even now, even with Mr. Harlan's words hanging in the air like a spotlight, I could see it in their eyes. They still didn't fully understand. But they would. The rest of dinner was awkward in the kind of way that clung to your skin. Mr. Harlan didn't stay long, just long enough to deliver a folder to my dad and exchange a few words about the upcoming board meeting. But even after he left, it felt like he'd never really gone. His words echoed in the silence he left behind. No one touched their plates. No one made eye contact. My brother, Matt, finally muttered, "So you're the reason Dad's been freaking out about that contract?" I gave a small shrug. "Not the reason. But I am part of the oversight team." "You didn't think to mention that?" my mom asked, her voice tight. "All this time?" I looked at her. "Would you have listened? Every time I call, you ask if I've thought about coming back to school. Or finding something more stable." I stopped explaining because it never mattered what I said. Her face fell, but she didn't argue. Maybe she knew I was right. Maybe she just didn't know how to respond now that the truth made things uncomfortable. My dad hadn't said a word since Mr. Harlan left. He sat at the head of the table, staring at his untouched food, his expression unreadable. I couldn't tell if he was angry, embarrassed, or just confused. Probably all three. But that was the thing, he always prided himself on being the provider, the man in charge, the one with the most respected job in the room. And now, suddenly, his daughter outranked him, not just in military status, but in the very company where he'd spent his entire career. The power dynamic had shifted, and no one knew how to sit with it. Chloe tried to lighten the mood. "I mean, it's kind of badass, right? Having a sister who's a colonel?" I smiled at her. At least someone was trying. "Thanks, Chloe." Matt leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "So what happens now? Are you gonna start telling Dad what to do at work?" "I'm not involved in the day-to-day. I'm overseeing the compliance reports and the integrity of the testing process. It's not personal." "But it is personal," Matt shot back. "You just embarrassed him in front of his boss, whether you meant to or not." "I didn't plan this," I said, trying to stay calm. "I didn't even know Harlan would be stopping by." Dad finally looked up. His voice was quiet but steady. "You've been reviewing my work, approving or rejecting my team's reports." Without saying a word. "I couldn't say anything," I replied, matching his tone. "It was confidential. You know how this works." He stared at me for a long moment, then stood up and walked away without a word. And just like that, the fragile structure of the evening collapsed. No one moved. No one spoke. In that heavy silence, I felt the real weight of what had just happened, not just the shock of my rank or the surprise visit, but the deeper conflict now surfacing. This wasn't just about pride or titles. It was about years of distance, misunderstanding, and the things we never said. And now, they couldn't be ignored. The silence after Dad left the room lingered like smoke. No one dared break it. My mom kept her hands folded in her lap, eyes locked on the empty space where my father had been sitting moments ago. Matt kept shifting in his seat like he wanted to say something, but couldn't decide whether to pick a side or just walk away. Chloe looked at me like she was watching something she didn't quite understand. I stood up slowly. I didn't come here to cause a scene, I said, keeping my voice steady. I just wanted a quiet dinner. But it's not a quiet dinner anymore, is it? Matt muttered. Now Dad's probably upstairs thinking you blindsided him in front of the one guy he's never wanted to disappoint. I looked at him. I didn't blindside anyone. I followed protocol. And believe it or not, I've been protecting Dad's department. There were issues in the early phases of testing. If someone else had flagged it first, that contract would have been gone. His eyes narrowed. What kind of issues? I paused, careful with my words. That's not something I'm allowed to discuss. But let's just say I made sure the right reports were reviewed and corrections were made before they turned into something worse. You covered for him? I protected the project. Which also protected him. My mom finally spoke up. Why wouldn't you just tell us any of this? We've been worrying about you for years, thinking you were throwing your life away. Meanwhile, you've been working at this level? I wanted you to see me, Mom. Not just as someone who left home or joined the army, but as someone who built something. Achieved something. Every time I tried to explain what I did, it just got brushed off like I was playing pretend in a uniform. She looked down, silent again. I took a deep breath and stepped away from the table. I could feel something building inside me, not anger, not quite sadness either, but something heavier. I had trained myself to stay calm under pressure, to lead with clarity in the middle of chaos. But this wasn't a mission. This was home. And somehow, it was more complicated than any battlefield. I made my way toward the stairs. My boots echoed on the hardwood floor, the weight of each step matching the tension in the air. I didn't know what I was walking into. I just knew I couldn't leave things hanging like this. As I reached the top of the stairs, I heard the faint sound of Dad's voice, low, almost like he was talking to himself. His office door was slightly ajar. Through the crack, I saw him sitting at his desk, the folder Mr. Harland had given him now open in front of him. He was staring at the documents, unmoving, like they were in a language he didn't understand. I took a step closer, then froze. He picked up his phone. Yeah, he said quietly. About that review meeting next week. I think we need to talk. My pulse quickened. Something had shifted. Not just in our family, but in his world. And I wasn't sure what I'd started. But I was about to find out. I stayed still in the hallway, just outside Dad's office, trying to make sense of what I just heard. His tone wasn't angry, it was cautious. Uncertain. That wasn't like him. For as long as I could remember, he always spoke with authority, especially when it came to work. But tonight there was a crack in that confidence. I didn't know she was involved that deeply. I heard him say into the phone. No, I'm not questioning her credentials. It's just, she's my daughter. I didn't realize the scope of her role. There was a long pause. I could only hear his breathing, slow and heavy. Then came something that stopped me cold. You said the audit was triggered by someone inside? I blinked. My breath caught. That wasn't supposed to be public knowledge yet. Only a few senior leaders knew the military had flagged something internally at the company. Someone had raised concerns about budget inconsistencies and testing procedures. That anonymous report was what put the entire $1.2 billion contract under review in the first place. And now Dad was talking about it, on the phone, with someone who clearly knew more than they should. He lowered his voice, almost to a whisper. If she's the one overseeing the investigation, and if she's the one who pushed the compliance revisions. My heart started pounding. He knew. He didn't just find out I was involved in the project. He had figured out that I might have been the one who initiated the internal probe in the first place. And he wasn't wrong. Months ago, I'd received an anonymous tip from a whistleblower deep within the engineering division, someone who was scared to come forward publicly. I ran a quiet review, and what I found didn't sit right. Certain reports didn't line up. Some equipment tests had been signed off without proper field data. It wasn't sabotage, but it was sloppy, and sloppy gets people killed in real operations. I didn't know at the time which department was responsible. Only later did I realize it traced back to my dad's division. And now he knew it too. I stepped back from the door, my mind racing. This changed everything. The dinner was already tense, but now the stakes had shifted from emotional to professional. My career, his job, and the company's entire defense contract were tangled in a knot that neither of us could ignore. If he felt cornered, what would he do? Back downstairs, I heard movement, chairs scraping, voices murmuring. Chloe probably trying to keep things normal. Matt likely still stewing over what he thought I'd done to embarrass Dad. But this wasn't about embarrassment anymore. It was about accountability. And I didn't know whether my father was ready to face that, or if he tried to bury it before the truth came out. One thing was certain, the conflict between us had just gone deeper than I ever imagined. And the hardest part was still ahead. I didn't sleep that night. None of us did. The next morning, I woke early and went for a run like I always did when my thoughts were too loud. The air was cold and sharp, but I needed it. Needed the clarity. When I got back, the house was quiet. Dad's car was gone. Mom had made coffee but barely touched her mug. Chloe offered me a weak smile. Matt wouldn't look me in the eye. By noon, I got the email I'd been waiting for. The internal review had been escalated. My recommendations were approved. The company would have to appear before the full oversight board, something that only happened when there were serious flags. I knew it would come down to this. But I didn't think it would feel so heavy. That afternoon, I received another call. This time, from General Wilcox, my direct superior. "We've confirmed the source of the discrepancies," he said. "One of the senior managers signed off on incomplete field tests. Same person oversaw the budget reallocation. You know who I'm talking about." I closed my eyes. "James Holloway." "My father." There was a long pause on the other end. "You good, Colonel?" I nodded before realizing he couldn't see me. "Yes, sir. I'm good." But I wasn't. Not really. Later that day, I went to the company headquarters. I had clearance to attend the closed-door pre-review meeting. My uniform felt heavier than usual, like it knew the personal weight of the next hour. Dad was already in the room when I entered. He stood when he saw me, not out of respect, but out of pure tension. The air thickened instantly. There were only 5 of us in the room, the compliance director, 2 board members, my father, and me. The director began the session, outlining the concerns. Then she turned to me. "Colonel Holloway, would you walk us through the findings?" I did. Calmly. Professionally. I didn't look at my dad as I spoke, but I could feel his gaze like a spotlight burning into the side of my face. When I finished, the room went quiet. That's when Dad stood. "I need to say something," he said. Everyone turned to him. "I didn't falsify reports. I didn't steal. But I did cut corners. I thought I was making up for lost time. We were behind schedule. I pushed my team harder than I should have. I made calls I thought I could control." He looked straight at me. "And I never thought it would be her who caught it." He didn't sound angry. He sounded defeated. But then, just when I thought it was over, the twist came. The compliance director spoke again. "Actually, Mr. Holloway, it wasn't your daughter who submitted the original whistleblower report. That came from someone in your team. She just verified it." My father blinked, stunned. I turned to him. "I didn't report you, Dad," I said quietly. "Someone you worked with every day did. I only made sure the truth got through." And in that moment, the weight shifted again, not with anger, not with revenge, but with realization. The truth had been there all along. And now, there was no going back. After the meeting ended, the room slowly cleared. The board members nodded politely to me before leaving, and the compliance director gave my arm a quick squeeze, silent, but understanding. Only Dad and I remained, standing on opposite sides of the table like 2 people who had fought the same war but ended up on different sides. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at me, a mix of pride, confusion, and maybe regret in his eyes. "So, it wasn't you who turned me in," he finally said, almost to himself. "No," I replied softly. "But I would have, if I'd known what was going on sooner." He nodded slowly. There was no anger in his face anymore, just the weight of accountability. I could see how much it stung him to realize someone in his own department hadn't trusted him enough to come forward directly. Or maybe they had, and he hadn't listened. Either way, the message was clear. "You did the right thing," he said at last. "Even if it cost me." "It didn't have to," I said. "You're lucky. You owned up to it before anyone forced your hand. That's more than most people do." He gave a faint, tired smile. "You're more like me than I thought." "I'm more like Mom," I replied with a small smirk. "I just follow the rules better." That actually got a chuckle from him. The first real one I'd heard in days. The company made adjustments. My father took a leave of absence and agreed to mandatory oversight on all future projects he worked on. It wasn't termination, but it was a clear line drawn. Respect had to be earned back. When we got home that night, the house was quiet again, but not in the tense, suffocating way it had been. This time, the silence felt like something had passed through and left space behind. A clearing. Maybe even a new start. Chloe hugged me tight in the hallway, whispering, "I told you." Badass. Matt was less vocal, but he pulled me aside and muttered, "I didn't get it before. Now I do." Even Mom, later that evening, placed a photo of me in uniform on the mantel next to the ones from our childhood, like she was finally seeing my life as part of the family story instead of something separate from it. It wasn't perfect. The damage of years couldn't be erased in a weekend. But for the first time, there was acknowledgement. And that meant everything. Sometimes the best kind of revenge isn't about proving someone wrong in a loud, dramatic way. Sometimes, it's about living your truth so clearly and confidently that the people who once doubted you are forced to see you differently. That dinner, what started as a night of old wounds and careless words, ended up being the turning point none of us expected. Not because I fought back, but because I showed up. Fully, unapologetically, as who I really was. And in the end, that was more powerful than anything I could have said.